Dean Daglish, Associate Dean Chenoy, incoming Dean Laurenti, friends, families, parents, my wife of 37 years, Roberta, fellow graduates, I salute you. A far greater orator than I said more than 70 ago that history will little note nor long remember what we say here today. And I fear it is the same with most commencement addresses. Who among you recalls who actually spoke at your graduation, those of you of that certain age, much less what wisdom they may have actually imparted? Well, of course, Abraham Lincoln was wrong, and I admit I harbor some tiny hope that maybe I'm wrong too. Speaking of Lincoln, by the way, one piece of advice I got about speechifying was that your remarks should either be better than or shorter than the Gettysburg Address. I'm afraid I'm going to break both of those rules today, but I promised not to drone on for 2 hours as featured orator Edward Everett did at Gettysburg in 1863. History, by the way, does little note nor long remember what Edward Everett said. It's fashionable these days to denigrate journalism degrees. It's often said, mostly by those who don't have journalism degrees, that you don't need one, and actually that's true. There are no minimum qualifications to be a journalist, and that's even more true today when anyone and everyone who has access to the means of self-publishing. But that does not mean that your degree is not a valuable asset. As a proud possessor now of not one, but 2 journalism degrees, I appreciate very most the time that my studies gave me to stop and think, and thinking being something that today's journalists, I think, could do a little more of. My master's thesis that Dr. Chenoy mentioned was a chance for me to reflect on the nature of truth and how we come to believe what it is we believe. We all tend to think that we're rational human beings, that we weigh the facts, that we make reasonable conclusions, but the facts, I found, tell a different story. Now, you know, when you write a master's thesis, you can't just bloviate for 75 pages on your favorite subject. It has to be a scholarly work with research and, yes, those dreaded footnotes, all in a very specific format. And that's why it takes so long to write. Of course, it has to have a scholarly title, and in my case, the name of my thesis was Elements of Disbelief, a case study of 9/11 truthers and the persistence of misinformation in the digital age. If and when I ever turn it into a book, I plan a little snappier title. I'm thinking of something like Stuck on Stupid, Why Smart People Believe Dumb Things. So I focused on an event, as Ira said, that I had some personal knowledge, the attack on September 11th, when terrorists flew a plane into the Pentagon. I was at the Pentagon that day. And if you're interested in the full story of what happened and how one of my live reports on CNN became part of the immortal conspiracy theories that are still surrounding September 11th, you're welcome to read my thesis. It's actually available on the web at elementsofdisbelief.blogspot.com. I picked the Pentagon attack as a point of study because by any rational measure, we know it did happen. American Airlines Flight 77 took off from Dulles Airport that morning. It crashed into the side of the Pentagon, killing all 64 people on board, including the 5 hijackers, as well as 125 people on the ground in the Pentagon. The evidence is overwhelming and conclusive, but yet many people, millions in fact, doubted. And I wanted to better understand why people believe what they do, often irrespective of the facts. As I said, you're welcome to read my thesis, but here's the main takeaway. One is that very convincing arguments can be made for things that are not true. And 2, the second takeaway, and probably the more important one, is that we have very strong emotional attachments to our beliefs because our beliefs in many ways define who we are, and we are loath to change our self-image. Now, this poses a particular challenge to journalists because I believe our most important role is to bring facts to bear on the problems and challenges and issues of our day and to provide context and perspective. It's the difference, as I like to say, between informing public opinion and inflaming public opinion. And too many news organizations these days are in the inflaming business, not the informing business. not becoming forums for reasoned debate, but instead factories for outrage. Mark Twain is often quoted as saying, "It ain't so much the things we don't know that gets us into trouble, it's the things we do know that just ain't so." And these days, there are many things we know that ain't so. Toyota has paid out billions of dollars for an unintended acceleration problem that federal experts and a team of NASA scientists could never find any evidence of. The IRS has been vilified for allegedly singling out conservative groups disproportionately for extra scrutiny, something that, if you look carefully at, the facts don't support. But these days, one person's facts are just another person's opinion. As Stephen Colbert is credited with saying, "I don't like facts. Facts can change. I like my opinion. It never changes, no matter the facts." It's a pithy quote. The only problem is I can't find any evidence he actually said it. That, by the way, goes for Mark Twain's quote, too. It turns out that some humorist of Twain's generation said it first, and apparently he repeated it at some point. But just added to the long list of things that we all know that aren't true. Columbus, turns out, didn't discover America. Vikings didn't have horns sticking out of their helmets. Napoleon, it turns out, well, it really wasn't all that short for his time. The list goes on. I mentioned Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. You all know he scribbled out those 10 sentences on the back of an envelope on the train on the way to Gettysburg, right? No, he didn't. He wrote it out carefully in longhand before he left Washington. So what am I saying here? Well, I'm saying this. We are awash in information, and so the role of professional journalists upholding the highest standards of accuracy, impartiality, and most important, rational, critical thinking is more important than ever. We've witnessed the damage that one flawed piece of reporting can do. Rolling Stone's now retracted article on the alleged gang rape at the University of Virginia has harmed everyone on all sides. The reputation of journalists is besmirched by those who are predisposed to see us as agenda-driven, self-promoting opportunists who are too willing to accept a preconceived narrative. It hurt the school, it hurt the campus fraternities, and most of all, it hurt the real victims of sexual assault who will now face increased skepticism and therefore maybe even less willing to come forward. At Al Jazeera America, where I now work, our mission statement is to give voice to the voiceless through journalism that informs and inspires, to strive for excellence in everything we do, to maintain credibility through impartial, accurate, and comprehensive reporting that tells real stories with integrity and respect. It's one of the reasons I decided to go there. And I would add to that one more thing, and I'll borrow a line from that Aaron Sorkin wrote for one of his characters in the very first episode of the HBO series The Newsroom. And in his words, it is to speak truth to stupid. Facts do matter. It is a disregard for facts and evidence that led to the anti-vaccine movement in the United States that's put all of us at risk. It is a disregard for facts that creates an irrational fear of Ebola while ignoring real health threats. As the late Daniel Patrick Moynihan purportedly said, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. Yeah, I know, I couldn't find the attribution for that either. Even in his own biography or by a close staff member. But let me close by saying this. The genius of Charles Dickens' opening line to The Tale of Two Cities is that it is always universally true. For journalism, this is the best of times and the worst of times. It is, in Dickens' words, an age of wisdom and an age of foolishness. But with all the unreason that pervades our public discourse these days, there is still an unprecedented opportunity to do good and more means than ever to do it. So I urge you all to go forth and do good. And just on a personal note, I would like to say that I would not be getting my Master's of Arts degree today were it not for the perseverance of Dr. Chenoy, who dragged me over the finish line and who I had the honor to have 2 classes with. He was an inspiring professor, and I'm very gratified to hear that he's going to be going back into the classroom where anyone who takes a class from him will benefit. Thank you again.